Ambassador Jake Morrison stood in the airlock of the Galactic Council's diplomatic station, adjusting his tie with one hand while gripping a tiny backpack covered in cartoon dinosaurs with the other. Behind him, his 3-year-old daughter Emma was humming something that might have been a song, or might have been the sound of existential chaos given melody. The airlock doors hissed open, and Jake stepped into what could only be described as the galaxy's most expensive waiting room. Holographic art rotated slowly on the walls. The floor was made of some kind of crystalline material that probably cost more than Earth's GDP. Everything screamed, "We take ourselves very seriously here." Ambassador Quillnax was waiting for them, all 7 feet of gelatinous, slug-like Zentarii draped in ceremonial robes that looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never met fabric before. His eye stalk swiveled toward Jake, then down to Emma, then back to Jake with the speed of a security camera that had just spotted a shoplifter. "Ambassador Morrison," Quillnax said, his translator box rendering his bubbly native language into something resembling a disappointed high school principal. "We were expecting you alone." "Yeah, about that," Jake said, setting down the backpack. "Babysitter canceled. Food poisoning. The human kind, not the intergalactic incident kind." Quillnax's eye stalks recoiled. "Ambassador, surely you are aware of Treaty Section 47, subsection D, paragraph 9, which explicitly states that apex predator species are prohibited from diplomatic missions." "I am," Jake said cheerfully. "Emma here is 3, not exactly at the top of the food chain yet. Can't even reach the cereal without a step stool." Emma chose that moment to look up at Quillnax with the wide, innocent eyes that every parent knows is actually a tactical weapon. "You're squishy," she announced. Quillnax's entire body rippled with what Jake assumed was either horror or the Zentarii, equivalent of a stress response. "Ambassador Morrison, humans qualify as apex predators. This is documented. Your species has binocular vision, persistence hunting capabilities, and an unsettling fondness for adopting other species young as pets." "Sure, but Emma's still in development," Jake countered. "She's more of a mid-tier opportunistic omnivore at this point. Besides, the treaty says apex species, plural, right? She's singular. Just one very small human." "That is not how grammar works," Quillnax sputtered. "Look," Jake said, lowering his voice to something resembling diplomatic sincerity. "I've traveled 2 weeks through slip space to get here. The trade route negotiations can't wait another month, and Emma's been really good on the trip. She only tried to dismantle the ship's navigation console twice." Quillnax's eye stalks drooped in what might have been defeat or resignation. "The Council will not be pleased about this. When is the Council ever pleased about anything?" Jake picked up the backpack in Emma's hand. "Come on, kiddo. Let's go meet some aliens." "Are they all squishy?" Emma asked, loud enough that Quillnax definitely heard it. Jake smiled. This was going to be a long day. The council chamber was impressive in the way that buildings designed by committee usually aren't. A circular room with seating pods arranged in a semicircle, each one customized for its occupant's physiology. Holographic displays floated in the center, ready to project whatever graphs and charts diplomats pretended to care about. Jake guided Emma to the human delegation pod, which was basically just 2 chairs that someone had clearly added last minute. Emma immediately claimed the bigger one, forcing Jake to squeeze into what was obviously meant to be the guest seat. "Distinguished delegates," Quillnax began, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who'd already lost an argument in the hallway. "I present Ambassador Morrison of Earth, and his offspring." The other 3 council members turned their attention to the human section, and Jake watched their reactions with the detached amusement of someone who'd stopped caring about first impressions around the second diaper blowout. Commander Trill was the first to react. 7 feet of crystalline warrior, each facet of his body reflecting light like a disco ball designed for warfare. His species, the Krillian Collective, had conquered 14 star systems through sheer military prowess. He took one look at Emma, and his chromatic patterns shifted to what Jake's briefing notes had described as extreme caution. "That is an infant predator," Trill stated, his voice resonating like someone had taught a wind chime to speak. "She's 3, Jake corrected. "Hardly an infant." High Scholar Pimwick, who resembled a rabbit that had been stretched to 4 feet tall and given a doctorate, clutched his data tablet closer to his chest. His species, the Fluffians, were herbivores who'd achieved space. Travel mostly by being too nervous to stop inventing things. "Does it bite?" he squeaked. "Only food," Jake said. "Usually." The final delegate, Trade Minister Gorv, was an amphibious glurbian whose skin glistened with the kind of moisture that suggested he was either from a water world or seriously stressed about these negotiations. His bulbous eyes fixed on Emma with the calculating gaze of someone doing risk assessment. The human wants trade routes through Sector 7. Perhaps we should discuss this quickly and minimize, exposure time. I like your shiny bits, Emma announced, staring directly at Commander Trill. The warrior's crystalline structure actually made a sound like cracking ice. Ambassador Morrison, please control your spawn. She's just being friendly, Jake said, pulling out Emma's coloring book and a box of crayons. Here, sweetie. Draw something nice while the adults talk about boring stuff. Emma accepted the crayons with the solemnity of someone receiving a sacred trust, then immediately dumped them all onto the floor. Pimwick jumped at the clatter. Right, Quillnax said, eye stalks swiveling in what might have been a plea to whatever deity the Zentarii believed in. Let us begin. Ambassador Morrison, Earth requests access to the Draken Trade Corridor, which would reduce shipping times to the Outer Rim by 40%. However, this corridor passes through space claimed by all 4 represented species. We must reach unanimous agreement. Jake leaned forward, attempting to project confidence while simultaneously using his foot to prevent Emma from crawling under the table. Earth offers a 20% reduction in tariffs for all member species, plus priority access to our agricultural exports. We've also developed a new medical technology that is the small human supposed to be mobile. Trill interrupted, his entire body shifting through colors that Jake's notes said meant tactical alert. Jake looked down. Emma had abandoned her coloring book and was now standing, surveying the room with the calculating gaze of a tiny general planning an invasion. Emma, sit down, please, Jake said. I want to see the pretty aliens, Emma replied, which was how Jake learned that his daughter had decided to take a walking tour of the most powerful legislative body in the galaxy. Gorv's skin went from glistening to actually dripping. Ambassador, restrain your predator. She's 3, Jake repeated, though he was starting to think that explaining this was going to be the theme of the entire meeting. Emma, come back to Daddy. Emma, demonstrating the selective hearing that all toddlers are born with, took a step toward Commander Trill's pod. The decorated war hero, veteran of the Krillian campaigns, conqueror of the disputed zones, actually climbed onto his chair. Commander Trill, Jake said slowly, watching a being who'd allegedly single-handedly held off an invasion force now perched on his seat like someone who'd just spotted a mouse. She's 3 feet tall and weighs 30 pounds. I am aware of human pack-hunting tactics, Trill said, his crystalline voice somehow managing to sound defensive. The small ones are often used as scouts. They assess weakness before the larger predators attack. That's wolves, Jake said. Different species. We just borrowed some of their strategies. Emma had now reached Trill's pod and was staring up at him with the kind of fascination usually reserved for new playground equipment. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a slightly crumpled piece of paper. I drew you a picture, she announced, holding it up. Trill's color patterns cycled through what Jake assumed was the Krillian equivalent of absolute panic. What is it? It's you, silly, Emma said. You're the nice monster. Jake craned his neck to see the drawing. It was, generously speaking, a collection of geometric shapes that might have been Trill if Trill had been designed by someone who'd only overface her. Heard shapes described over a bad phone connection. A wobbly circle, some triangular spikes, and what might have been a smile or possibly a mountain range. I am not a monster, Trill said with the wounded dignity of someone whose military decorations suddenly meant nothing. I am a decorated commander of the Krillian. Do you want to color with me? Emma interrupted, because toddlers respect military rank about as much as they respect bedtime. No, I do not want to color with you, Trill said, still standing on his chair. Pimwick had retreated so far into his pod that only his ears were visible. His voice emerged muffled and terrified. Ambassador Morrison, perhaps we should reschedule this meeting for a time when you have proper childcare arrangements. We've been scheduling this meeting for 6 months, Gorv interjected, though he'd also notably shifted to the far side of his pod. The trade routes are time-sensitive. I say we proceed and simply maintain a safe distance from going. The human juvenile. Safe distance, Jake muttered. She's not radioactive. Emma, having been rejected by Trill, had now moved on to Pimwick's pod. She peered into it with the scientific curiosity of a researcher who'd just discovered a new specimen. Why are you hiding? A small squeak emerged from within the pod. Are you playing hide-and-seek? Emma asked, delighted. I'm really good at that game. No games, Quillnax said firmly, his eye stalks extended to maximum length, which Jake had learned meant he was either very stressed or about to secrete something defensive. "Emma, please return to your seat. But I want to play with the bunny," Emma said. "I am not a bunny," came Pimwick's muffled voice. "I am a high scholar with 3 doctoral degrees and a citation index that, you have big ears like a bunny," Emma observed, which was factually accurate and diplomatically disastrous. Jake stood up. "Emma, come on, let's go back to coloring. I'll help you draw a spaceship." "I want to draw the bunny," Emma said, but she did start walking back toward their pod. The collective sigh of relief from the other delegates was actually audible. That lasted approximately 4 seconds, which was when Emma spotted it. The orb of unity sat on a ceremonial pedestal in the center of the chamber. It was roughly the size of a soccer ball, made of some kind of luminescent crystal that shifted colors in a way that probably meant something significant to people who cared about symbolism. According to Jake's briefing materials, it was approximately 8,000 years old and represented the founding of the Galactic Council. Emma's eyes lit up the way they did when she spotted cookies. "Pretty ball," she announced. "No," Jake said. No, Quillnax added. "Absolutely not," Gorv contributed. "Everyone remain calm," Trill said, finally stepping down from his chair and moving with the tactical precision of someone approaching an armed explosive. "Nobody make any sudden movements." Emma walked up to the pedestal, stood on her tiptoes, and grabbed the orb of unity with both hands. The entire room froze. "Mine now," Emma declared, hugging the ancient artifact to her chest like it was a stuffed animal. Quillnax made a sound that the translator couldn't process, rendering it as error, error, error. Jake moved forward slowly, hands raised in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "Emma, sweetie, that's not a toy. That belongs to everyone here." "But it's so pretty," Emma said, turning the orb over in her hands. Light cascaded across her face in shifting patterns. "Can I keep it?" "No. You cannot keep the foundational symbol of galactic unity," Jake said, reaching for it carefully. Emma pulled it away. Then, in a move that would haunt Jake's diplomatic career forever, tossed the 8,000-year-old artifact into the air and caught it. Pimwick fainted. The orb of unity tumbled through the air in what felt like slow motion, and Jake watched 3 of the galaxy's most powerful representatives simultaneously experience what he could only describe as a collective stroke. Gorv's skin went from moist to basically a puddle. Trill's crystalline body flashed through every color in the spectrum, including a few Jake was pretty sure weren't visible to human eyes. Quillnax's eye stalks went completely rigid, pointing straight up like someone had hit his emergency shutdown button. Emma caught the orb with the casual grace of a kid who'd spent the last year playing catch, completely unaware that she'd just given 4 alien species simultaneous heart attacks. She said, tossing it again. "Stop," all 3 conscious delegates shouted in unison, which the translator rendered in their respective languages, as what sounded like a chorus of existential horror. Jake crossed the distance in 3 strides and gently intercepted the orb mid-flight. Emma's lower lip started to tremble in that way that every parent recognizes as the 5-second warning before a nuclear meltdown. Hey, Jake said quickly, kneeling down and handing her back her coloring book. "Look, you can draw the pretty ball instead. Make it any color you want." The lip wobble paused. Emma considered this. Any color. You can even use the sparkly crayons." Crisis averted. Emma took the coloring book and returned to their pod, already debating whether the orb should be purple or rainbow. Jake carefully placed the orb of unity back on its pedestal, then turned to face the council. Gorv was breathing like he'd just run a marathon. Trill had shifted to a color that Jake's notes indicated meant either battle-ready or deeply traumatized, which seemed like a design flaw in Krillian emotional communication. Quillnax's eye stalks were slowly returning to their normal position. "Is the orb damaged?" Gorv finally managed. Jake examined it. "Looks fine. Not even a fingerprint. Not even a..." Quillnax's translator made a sound like a dial-up modem. "Dying. Ambassador Morrison, that artifact has survived 8 millennia, 3 galactic wars, and the Great Council Purge of Sector 9. It has never, in its entire history, been used as a plaything by an apex predator juvenile." "Well," Jake said, straightening his tie and returning to his seat. "Now it has, and it's fine, which kind of proves my point." "What point?" Trill demanded, his voice still carrying harmonics of stress. Jake sat down, and in that moment, decided that if this diplomatic mission was already a disaster, he might as well lean into it. He gestured to Emma, who was now humming and coloring the orb in a pattern that could only be described as aggressive rainbow. "You all see her as a threat," Jake began. A tiny apex predator who doesn't understand the rules or respect boundaries. And you're right, she is absolutely a threat. Do you know why? The three delegates stared at him. Because humans evolved to keep these things alive, Jake continued. Do you understand what that means? Emma's 3 years old. In that time, she's tried to eat poisonous cleaning supplies, climb furniture that wasn't designed for climbing, stick metal objects into electrical outlets, and just yesterday she tried to pet a neighbor's dog that was actively barking at her. And she's still here, alive, intact, mostly. I don't understand the relevance, Gorv started. The relevance, Jake interrupted, is that you're all looking at Emma and seeing a predator, but you're missing the real threat. It's not her, it's me. It's every human parent who's spent the last several years in a constant state of threat assessment. We evolved to track small, fast-moving objects with lethal accuracy. We developed persistence that lets us chase prey for days. And we did all of that while simultaneously preventing our offspring from self-destructing. He pointed to Trill. Commander, you said you've held off invasion forces. How many of them were actively trying to kill themselves while you defended them? Trill's crystalline structure flickered. That is not a standard military scenario. Exactly, Jake said. Humans don't just survive hostile environments. We survive hostile environments while keeping tiny chaos agents alive. Emma's not the apex predator you should worry about. She's the training program. Quilnax's eye stalks swiveled in what might have been understanding or possibly a minor seizure. You're saying that human parenting is essentially military conditioning. I'm saying that any species capable of preventing a toddler from dying for 18 years straight has threat assessment skills that make us the most naturally paranoid, persistently vigilant apex predators in the galaxy, Jake said. We don't conquer through strength. We conquer through sheer inability to let anything die on our watch. That's horrifying, Pimwick whispered, having apparently regained consciousness at the worst possible moment. That's evolution, Jake. Corrected. Emma chose that moment to walk over to Gorv, who pressed himself so far back into his pod that he was essentially wearing it as a shell. She held up her coloring book. I made the ball rainbow, she announced proudly. Do you like it? Gorv stared at the picture, then at Emma, then at Jake. His skin had stopped dripping, but he still looked like someone who'd just understood something profound and terrible. It's very colorful, he managed. Emma beamed, then wiped her crayon-stained hands directly on Gorv's diplomatic sash. The trade minister looked down at the streak of purple and green now decorating the ceremonial garment that represented his entire planetary government. I appear to have been marked, he said quietly. Yeah, Jake said. Welcome to parenthood. Jake watched Gorv stare at the crayon smudge on his sash with the hollow-eyed expression of someone who'd just discovered that diplomatic immunity didn't protect against toddlers. Emma, pleased with her artistic contribution, had already moved on, and was now attempting to see if she could fit entirely inside Pimwick's pod with him. She could not, but the High Scholar's terrified squeaking suggested she was going to keep trying. Let me tell you something about humans, Jake said, leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of a man who'd already lost control of the situation and made peace with it. Every single one of us is alive today because somewhere in our ancestry, someone managed to keep a tiny, irrational human alive long enough for it to become a slightly larger, slightly more rational human. Do you understand what that takes? Negligence laws? Quilnax suggested weakly. Constant vigilance, Jake corrected. You're all sitting here, terrified of Emma. And you should be. Not because she's dangerous, but because she's fundamentally incapable of understanding consequences. She doesn't know that the Orb of Unity is priceless. She doesn't know that Commander Trill could shatter diamonds with his bare hands. She doesn't care that Gorv's sash took 6 months to weave according to traditional Glurbian custom. It took 8 months, Gorv said mournfully, still staring at the purple streak. Even worse, Jake continued. Emma operates on pure curiosity and zero impulse control. She's a chaos engine, and humans evolved specifically to predict and prevent that chaos. Do you know what I was doing while we were talking about trade routes? I was simultaneously tracking her position, calculating which objects in this room she could reach, assessing which delegates she'd approach based on her interest patterns, and preparing 3 different contingency plans for when she inevitably did something unpredictable. Trill's colors shifted to something Jake's notes identified as grudging respect mixed with horror. That is an impressive tactical assessment capability. That's a Tuesday, Jake said. Every human parent does this, every day, for years. We predict chaos. We plan for disaster. We develop reflexes fast enough to catch falling objects we didn't even know were falling. And we do all of this while also holding down jobs, maintaining relationships, and pretending we have our lives together. This explains the human success in the negotiation wars, Pimwick said quietly from inside his pod, where Emma had given up trying to join him and was now drawing on the outside. They weren't better diplomats. They were just accustomed to dealing with irrational actors. Exactly, Jake said. You want to know why humans are dangerous? It's not our binocular vision, or our endurance, or our tendency to adopt anything that looks vaguely cute. It's because we spent our entire evolutionary history keeping the most self-destructive creatures in the universe alive. Ourselves. As children, Quillnax's eye stalks drooped in what might have been understanding or possibly exhaustion. You're saying that human children are actually the apex. Predators and adult humans are the survival specialists. Now you're getting it, Jake said. Emma's not going to hunt you. She's not going to hurt you. She's just going to exist in your vicinity with absolutely no regard for social norms, physical boundaries, or the structural integrity of your civilization. And I'm going to spend every second of that time making sure she doesn't accidentally destroy something irreplaceable. That's the human advantage. We're not the predators. We're the cleanup crew for predators we made ourselves. That's the most disturbing thing I've heard in my entire diplomatic career, Gorv said. I haven't even told you about potty training yet, Jake replied. Emma had finished her artwork on Pimwick's pod and was now spinning in circles, watching her dress flare out. The delegates watched her like she was a live grenade on a trampoline. So here's my proposal, Jake said. You give us the trade routes. In exchange, Earth agrees to never, ever suggest joint custody programs or cultural exchange initiatives involving anyone under the age of 12. We keep our chaos agents on our side of the galaxy. You get efficient shipping lanes, and nobody has to experience what Gorv just experienced with his sash. The three delegates looked at each other. Some kind of silent communication happened that Jake couldn't quite follow. The treaty will need amendments, Quillnax finally said, specifically regarding the definition of apex predators and the threat classification of juvenile specimens. I can work with that, Jake said. And humans must agree to clearly label any delegations that include offspring, Trill added, with appropriate warning periods. Reasonable. And perhaps a clause about liability for damaged ceremonial objects, Gorv said, touching his sash gently, like it was a wounded soldier. I'll run it by Earth, Jake agreed. Emma stopped spinning and looked up at her father. Daddy, I'm hungry. 4 alien species watched as Jake calmly pulled a juice box and a bag of crackers from the dinosaur backpack. You brought provisions for it, Trill observed. Always, Jake said. Rule 1 of parenting. Never go anywhere without snacks. What's Rule 2? Pimwick asked. Jake smiled. Never tell other species about Rule 2. That's classified. The treaty amendments took another 20 minutes to finalize, which was apparently a galactic record for diplomatic efficiency. Jake suspected it had less to do with the strength of his arguments, and more to do with the fact that Emma had discovered she could make echo sounds in the chamber and was testing the acoustic properties with increasing volume. Hello, she shouted at the ceiling. Hello, the chamber replied. Pretty aliens. Pretty aliens, the chamber echoed back, while the pretty aliens in question looked like they were reconsidering their entire career choices. Quillnax transmitted the final documents to Jake's datapad with the exhausted efficiency of someone who just wanted this day to end. The amended treaty now reads as follows. No apex predators shall attend diplomatic missions, except for humans, who are clearly already too tired to be a threat. Furthermore, any human delegation, including juvenile members, must provide 72 hours advance notice and a detailed chaos probability assessment. Chaos probability assessment? Jake asked. A scale of 1 to 10 rating the likelihood of property damage, emotional distress, or violation of ceremonial protocols, Quillnax explained. Your daughter would be rated at approximately 15. That's fair, Jake admitted, watching Emma try to climb into his lap while holding her juice box at an angle that defied both physics and his dry cleaning budget. The trade routes are yours, Gorv said, still occasionally glancing at his stained sash with the look of someone experiencing the 5 stages of grief simultaneously. Sector 7 access, reduced tariffs, priority shipping lanes. Congratulations, Ambassador Morrison. You've successfully negotiated one of the most advantageous trade agreements in recent history, while simultaneously traumatizing the entire Galactic Council, Pimwick added quietly. Multitasking, Jake said. It's a human specialty. Commander Trill stood, his crystalline form catching the light in a way that would have been impressive if Jake hadn't just watched him climb on furniture to escape a toddler. Ambassador Morrison, I have fought in 17 major conflicts. I have led troops through impossible odds. I have stared down war fleets and never retreated. He paused, his colors shifting to something that looked almost like respect. I would rather do all of that again than spend another hour in the presence of your offspring. I'll take that as a compliment, Jake said. It was not intended as one, Trill replied. But I suspect you will anyway. That also seems to be a human specialty. Emma had finished her juice box and was now using the empty container as a telescope, peering through it at each delegate in turn. Bye-bye, shiny person, bye-bye, squishy person, bye-bye, bunny, bye-bye, wet person. Goodbye, small terror, Gorv said, with what might have been genuine fondness, or possibly Stockholm Syndrome. Jake gathered up the coloring books, crayons, and various debris that seemed to generate spontaneously around Emma. He hoisted her onto his hip. She was already getting heavy, he noted. Soon he wouldn't be able to carry her like this, and headed toward the airlock. Oh, Ambassador Morrison. Quillnax called out, his eye stalks perking up slightly. One final question. You mentioned this negotiation took 6 months to schedule. Does Earth have many similar diplomatic priorities in the pipeline? A few, Jake said. Why? And do you typically handle these negotiations personally? Usually. I'm the senior ambassador for this sector. Quillnax's eye stalks did something that might have been the Zentaria, equivalent of a nervous smile. And is Emma your only offspring? Jake paused at the airlock door. He looked back at the 4 delegates, all of whom were watching him with expressions ranging from exhausted relief to lingering trauma. He smiled. Oh, no, he said cheerfully. Emma's the calm one. I have twin boys at home. They're 5. The color drained from Gorv so fast that Jake genuinely worried the Glurbian might evaporate. Pimwick made a sound like a kettle reaching maximum pressure. Trill's crystalline structure actually developed what looked like a stress fracture. Quillnax's eye stalks went completely limp. Ambassador Morrison, Quillnax said slowly, when you inevitably return for the follow-up negotiations in 6 months. 3 months, actually, Jake corrected. We're on an accelerated timeline. Perhaps your babysitter will be available. Maybe, Jake said, but she's starting to charge hazard pay, so no promises. The airlock door closed on 4 of the galaxies, most powerful beings staring into the middle distance like they just understood something fundamental about the universe and deeply regretted the knowledge. Emma waved goodbye through the porthole window. I like the aliens, Daddy. I know you do, sweetie, Jake said, adjusting her weight on his hip and heading toward their ship. Can we come back? Jake thought about the amended treaty, the trade routes, and the fact that he'd just secured humanity's economic expansion into 3 new sectors by doing nothing more than being a parent in public. Yeah, he said. We can come back. Behind them, faintly audible through the station's walls, came the sound of Quillnax explaining to his staff that they needed to update the station's insurance policy. Jake smiled. Another successful day in the diplomatic corps. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder before they reached the ship, one small hand still clutching a crayon, leaving a small green mark on his jacket that he'd probably notice later, and definitely wouldn't have time to clean before the next meeting. Somewhere in the distance, in 3 months, another diplomatic mission awaited. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but Jake did, and he was already packing extra juice boxes.